Today, a meeting was held of the heads of state and governments of the CIS countries. Just recently, each meeting of the CIS on the level of heads of state or of the governments invariably was marked with an extraordinary, grandiose or pompous tone. Today's session, the last one this year, is clearly an exception. Even the third anniversary since the signing of the Belarusk Agreement and the birth of the CIS didn't inspire any of its participants to discuss previously traditional topics, national sovereignty or independence. For the first time, the heads of the governments of all the sovereign states are seriously, evidently contemplating how to pull the economies out of their crisis, out of a most profound crisis. This goal cannot be achieved on a solitary basis. Hence, statistics were quoted in the speech of the chairman of the session, Viktor Chernomyrdin. The gross domestic product of the CIS countries in the current year will decrease by 16% and the volume of industrial yield by 23%. This possibly was the basic reason for the expeditious and unanimous approach in resolving the 19 questions in the agenda. The majority of them are connected with realizing the agreement on creating an economic union of the CIS. Two voluminous documents, for example, are intended to alleviate and expedite the forming of a common customs duty expense. A serious problem is to be resolved by documents which institute a unique corps of quick response forces for accidents and disasters, which still occur frequently on the expanses of the Commonwealth. Not bypassed was the problem which concerns us most, the social problem which was remarked on by the head of the Russian government, Viktor Chernomyrdin. Creating a common market, he stated, we should provide in the future a natural right for citizens to freely move about within the Commonwealth, the right to work at a chosen location or residence after retirement in any CIS country. In the opinion of the participants of the session, the priority objective of the coming year should be the forming of a sole technological expanse of the European Union type. And the key role in this matter should be played by the Intergovernmental Economic Committee. If we view this meeting within the framework of further integration, then it precisely has made this next step. But will this step lead to the practical realization of the principle of mutual benefit in our relations and the creation of a truly functioning and a CIS respected by the world will not be shown so much by the new 1995, but by the political will of the leaders of all our countries. The President Boris Yeltsin today instructed the government of the Russian Federation to use all means at the country's disposal in order to disarm the militarized formations in the Chechnya Republic and in the zone of the Osetino-Ingushetian conflict. In the decree he signed, which arrived in Intertas from the press service of the President, it says that, pursuant to the Constitution of Russia, banned and outside the law is any activity aimed at violating the wholeness of the Russian Federation, undermining the security of the country, and the creation of armed formations, inciting ethnic and religious conflict. The Minister of Defense of Russia, the General of the Army, Pavel Grachev, at 18:20 flew from Moscow to the Northern Caucasus region. The military headquarters of the Armed Forces of the Interim Council of Chechnya announced that on the 12th of December it will resume combat activities against the Dudayev regime. This information Intertas received from the Press Secretary of the Informational Committee of the Interim Council, Islam Magomadov. In the materials disseminated by the Interim Council, these decisions are connected with the resolution of the Federative Council adopted Thursday, in which the need to organize an effective peace dialogue between the conflicting political sides in Chechnya with participation of mediators was noted. The Council also severely criticizes deputies of the State Duma who recently visited Grozny. Regarding the Dudayev regime, a high-placed official of his apparatus confirmed in a conversation with a correspondent of Intertas the readiness of Grozny on the 12th of December to begin talks in Vladikavkaz with the delegation from Russia. Meanwhile, our special correspondent, Vladimir Murtazin, reports from Chechnya. Pursuant to the agreement between Pavel Grachev and Jahar Dudayev, the last 8 Russian troops imprisoned during the storming of Grozny have been released. Tonight, they joined one of the military units of Vladikavkaz, and yesterday our soldiers and officers were handed over in Grozny to the personal representative of the Minister of Defense of Russia, the General Ivan Chish. Unfortunately, Ivan Chish couldn't take them all. One seriously injured was left in the Grozny hospital. It's presumed that a medical plane will come for him. However, the question what to do next is not yet resolved. Probably that's why the Russian Minister of Defense postponed the trip planned yesterday to Mozdok. Meanwhile, units deployed there are not undertaking any actions but are awaiting further orders from Moscow. Andrei Murtazin had submitted his report, and later news arrived from TASS that the Russian troops handed over Thursday night by Chechnya authorities to the representative of the Minister of Defense of Russia today at 1600 hours arrived by plane to the suburban Moscow military Chukovsky airport. The Temporary Information Center reports that news about the dismissal of the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs of Russia from his post because of the events in Chechnya, the commander of the Internal Forces, Colonel General Kulikov, does not correspond to reality. Today, Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov told the press that the Federative Council instructed the Prosecutor General to expose the culprits of the recent tragic events in the Chechnya Republic. According to the Deputy Chairman of the Higher Chamber of the Federal Assembly, the majority of parliamentarians positively assessing the decision of Boris Yeltsin on restoring constitutional order in Chechnya at the same time are dissatisfied with forms and methods for realizing that initiative. Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov hopes that the President will react positively to the resolution of the Federative Council, which provides specifically for a dialogue of Moscow with all political forces or social movements in Chechnya, and also indicating the impermissibility of the use of force prior to decisions being made by competent organs. Deputy Chairman of the Federative Council called dangerous the replacement of patient work of political regularization with brute force, noting that establishing peace in Chechnya, which is suffering from anarchy, should be achieved via peaceful constitutional means. Since morning today, the State Duma of Russia was in session, and again, in the agenda, there should have been the discussion of the draft resolution on the situation in Chechnya and measures for its political regularization. As you know, yesterday the deputies expressed serious concern over the bloodshed in Chechnya, but no decisions have been adopted. As far as I understand, the report from the Duma is being prepared currently, and as soon as it's ready, you will see it. I'll continue for now. Among the many questions discussed today by the State Duma, it recognized as unsatisfactory the results of the first check level of privatization. This decision was supported today by 241 deputies. The Chamber recommends to the President to suspend his decree on launching the second level of privatization until the Duma adopts a corresponding law. The Chamber feels that it is necessary to conduct a serious correction within the policy of privatization, and also offers the government to create a joint task force for further work on the state program of privatization after the 1st of July of this year. The Vice Premier Anatoly Chubais is of a different position. The objectives of the coming year, attracting private investments to revitalize productivity and to uplift the economy overall, were topics of the press conference in Moscow of the first Vice Premier of the government, Anatoly Chubais. He also heads the Securities Commission and the funds market, because the securities market, the establishment of civilized rules, are intended to combine the potentials of Russians with productivity. A citizen of Russia, Chubais said, is the main investor in the economy, and his rights must be reliably protected. The dynamics in the growth of savings today is as follows. If in 1992 Russians put into savings accounts only 4% of their revenues, then this year it is already 23%. The sum of savings overall is approaching the figure of 20 trillion rubles. On the market, there can be no room for dishonest companies. Among the unreliable, Anatoly Chubais classified the company Hapyor Invest. It's the only one which did not officially confirm its investments in productivity. In the event, if my second request, which I signed today, to the company Hapyor Invest is not satisfied, the Commission will resort to all strict measures in order to bring order into the operations of that company. And now, I was just told that the report is ready with details from the State Duma. The Duma, after all, did not adopt the expected resolution on the situation in the Chechnya Republic and measures for its political regularization, and also on the amnesty for participants who would voluntarily relinquish weapons by the 15th of December. Its basis was to be discussion of the problem at yesterday's closed session of the Duma. The Speaker of the Chamber, Ivan Rybkin, expressed dissatisfaction over the fact that in the text submitted today, almost no amendments were included, which had been proposed previously. The Duma instructed the Defense Committee to check whether Russian troops who returned from prison are being subjected to investigation by Russian authorities. In the Duma Press Center, the leaders of the Republican Party announced to the journalists that the military troops are in a safe place, which is not to be announced until the authorities and the President give guarantees that the military are not threatened by any repressive actions. The deputy deputies again could not find unanimity on state symbols of Russia. They declined the draft decree of the president, according to which the three-colored flag is confirmed and the two-headed eagle. Which question discussed today by the Duma attracted the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I must say that I, on purpose, considered it was necessary to participate, and also must say that I'm experiencing disappointment and some embarrassment in front of the voters, because today the Duma could not recognize the fait accompli, that is, Russian symbolism, which is already accustomed to in the world, and we're all accustomed to, and that shows that ideological ideas take precedence over elementary common sense and national interests. Examining the question on privatization, the deputies recognized its results as unsatisfactory. In the resolution, they recommend to the president to suspend the enforcement of his decree to launch the second level of privatization until a corresponding law comes into existence. A few short news items from the Economic Chronicle of the day. In the period from the 30th of November to the 6th of December 1994, in Russia, prices on consumer goods and services rose by 3.9%. Meanwhile, in the capital of Russia, a serious situation is developing with food supply for the multi-million population of the city. Hence, the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Loshkov, appealed in an open letter to the chairman of the government of the Russian Federation, Viktor Chernomyrdin. In that letter, the text of which was received by Tartas, reasons for the problems are indicated, and a request to the government of the country is expressed to provide assistance in its resolution. The director of Avtovaz, Vladimir Kadanikov, predicts a significant decline in auto manufacturing by the end of the year compared to the previous one. In the opinion of the board of directors, in 1994, the largest decline in manufacturing was observed in the entire history of Avtovaz. During the last month, Avtovaz managed to at least partially reduce delay in its assembly schedule caused by the October strike of workers at the main assembly belt. But despite some increase in productivity, problems exist and worsen in all departments of the company. The main thing is difficulties with financing. The cost of the products continues to grow. Even the last two price increases don't save the situation, and yet VAZ hopes to survive. And therefore, here they plan to change the structure of productivity, increase its effectiveness. It's presumed that the new scheme of managing productivity will be more mobile and simple. It's planned also to set up brigades of worker circles for employees interested in decreasing productivity expenditures, such as those functioning in Japanese companies. Work continues on creating a new family of Zhigulis, VAZ 2110. The test models of the vehicle should come out in the beginning of the new year. Russia and Ukraine in Moscow today signed the null version, the agreement on the division of assets and liabilities of the former USSR. But our neighbors today have an urgent occurrence. News arrived that today at 7:30 Moscow time, in the North Atlantic Ocean near the coast of Canada, the Ukrainian cargo ship was shipwrecked, the Salvador Allende, belonging to the shipping concern the Blasco Black Sea Shipyards. Rescue work is underway. The number of crew members which were on board is more than 30 seamen who are currently on inflatable rafts. There are no reports on casualties. And now Armenia. The empty trolleybuses and trolley cars forced to stand for hours because of the absence of power in cables and people accumulating at bus stops. With the arrival of winter, the energy crisis in the Republic again has reached its climax. For 23 days, there was no gas at all. Finally, it was turned on, but in such a low volume, 2 million cubic meters per day, the bread factories are barely managing, and for private homes use 40 minutes of light per day. One hole was patched up, another one opened. On the day when Turkmenia resumed feed of gas to Armenia, in Georgia a bridge was blown up over Kharani River, over which from Poti humanitarian grain and fuel is delivered. And immediately the price on gasoline jumped sharply. Compared to the end of November, the price of a 20-liter canister doubled, and today was equivalent to almost $20 American. But for now, it's only the beginning of winter. And again, the economic problems of Russia, the military aspect. Such a number of black limousines the students of the Academy of Missile Forces hadn't seen for a long time. On the occasion of the coming 35th anniversary of the Missile Forces of Strategic Designation, almost all the Russian nuclear elite decided to discuss the problem, how to keep the umbrella of nuclear security over Russia at a moment when the hand that feeds it has faltered. Military experts assert that Missile Forces of Strategic Designation of Russia are the cheapest forces, sustaining using in order to sustain, they would use 5 to 6% of the military budget. However, even this money is not paid to the personnel. In 1994, Russian nuclear forces were allotted less than half of the necessary funds and also put an end to the program of converting the ground nuclear complex Topol, universally allotting for this program 37% of the needed. According to the head commander of the missile forces, Igor Sergeyev, the nuclear shield of Russia for now is being kept without cracks only because of old reserves. At the same time, pursuant to the presidential decree, a new shaft version of the famous mobile Topol is being prepared. Everything possible and impossible is being done in order to carry out the decree of the president, because we understand that by not carrying out this decree, the further we regress, the more difficult it will be for Russia to maintain at least that minimum quota which is permitted us by agreement. In 1994, it will be 35 years since the opening of a nuclear umbrella over Russia. Today, specialists are interested only in one question: who, in the higher organs of power, will take on themselves the responsibility to close it in 1995. In one day, exactly, our city grows by one story. So one recalls the words of the once popular song when you view the tempos of construction of a military town on the peripheral part of Rostov. If more precisely, it's not a military town, but for the military, those who have been withdrawn from Germany and members of their families. In the contemporary housing microregion for 1,549 apartments, the entire infrastructure was foreseen: nurseries, schools, public centers, medical clinics for 300 patients, and a pharmacy. The overall cost of the construction was 159 million marks, money allotted by the government of Germany. The tender, or competition, for the right to complete the construction was won by the German construction firm Hochtief and its general contractor Glav Bulgar Stroy. Their project for the town was more adapted to the Russian conditions and, what is important, significantly cheaper. These photos were taken in March and April of this year when the first spikes were being driven in, and now in December the finishing crews are already installing locks on the doors. Alexander, those scheduled time limits which were planned, will you manage within them, because very little time is left? The schedules on the homes we will keep, and as well on nurseries. The problem now is with heating, the problem is with gas and testing boiler stations. Concretely, when can the military and their families celebrate housewarmings in this village? In January, the military will be able to receive their apartments. Visiting Pridnestrovia and Gagauzia was the High Commissioner from the Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe on Affairs of Ethnic Minorities, Max van der Stoel. During his meetings with the local organs of power and with the public, possibilities were examined of the assistance of the OSCE in helping resolve existing interethnic problems. Max van der Stoel emphasized that in connection with the recent reorganization, the OSCE intends to play a larger role in regularizing conflicts on the former USSR. In this connection, he didn't exclude the possibility of broadening the authority of the peacekeeping mission of the OSCE in Moldova, even to the point of endowing it with control functions. Today in Bucharest, an anti-Russian demonstration was held. The reason for that was today's one-year anniversary since the sentences were read over the Ilashko group. For committing diversionary acts during the Pridnestrovyan conflict, the Tiraspol court condemned Ilashko to death and his cohorts to various terms of prison. To this day, the entire group is in prison. If in Tiraspol they're called criminals, but here in Bucharest they call them national heroes and demand that they be titled honorary citizens of the country. The first stop of the column of demonstrators was made at the Embassy of Moldova. Demonstrators accused the current Chisinau authorities of not wishing to free the fighters for a unified Romania and reproached them for Moscow ideology, but the main culprit, the opposition, sees as Russia. Therefore, at the building of our embassy, the main rally was held. Incidentally, anti-Russian speeches, as the opposition itself, have no great success in Romania. In the American city Miami, in the southerly state of Florida, today the meeting of the heads of state of the Western Hemisphere opened. On the calendar it's December, and in Florida, the heat of the season, and not just on the beach. The press center was set up in the port, 4,000 journalists. Such was seen only at the Russian-Soviet-American summit during the Cold War. Here they will not fight. 34 heads of state, the entire Western Hemisphere except for Cuba, intend to speak about trade, which, according to their belief, must be free. Now they say, let's do away with customs barriers. We're ready for honest competition. The United States is not against it, but affluent people who can afford something made in Detroit, for now, are few. in Latin America. Official representatives assert if we don't agree, Japan and Europe will come in, and what about us? The American labor unions are against free trade. A worker on the assembly line, again in Detroit, is protected by the law. One can't fire them for nothing. There are minimum salaries, etc. And in Latin America, they assert there is still exploitation. How do you compete with them? Probably the agreement on free trade in the Western Hemisphere for the year 2005 will be signed, and they'll also agree to increase the battle with drug dealers and confiscate laundered money. The Western Hemisphere, like the entire world, grows increasingly smaller. Free trade and democracy are indivisible. The United States became convinced of this through their own experience. Insisting on the isolation of Cuba, Americans contradict themselves. It would be of greater benefit to begin to trade with Cuba. Finally, good quality goods and no lineups or ration ticket coupons is better an argument in favor of common sense, even if this is called capitalism. Today, in the German city Essen, the session of the European Union Summit convened. The heads of the states and governments of 12 countries are discussing the economic future of the continent and also prospects of cooperation with countries of Central and Eastern Europe. The American President, Bill Clinton, offered to send to Bosnia more than 25,000 American troops in the event of a possible evacuation of UN peacekeeping forces. France offered to take the troops out as well after fruitless attempts to regularize the crisis in Bosnia. Today in Maputo, Joaquim Chissano was sworn into office as President of the Republic of Mozambique. After swearing the oath, the head of their country said in his address to the people that peace, multi-party democracy, national reconciliation and reconstruction are the basic points of his new platform. In Panama, in one of the Cuban refugee camps, disorders erupted. Around 1,000 Cubans attacked the American troops. The soldiers did not open fire. As a result of the clash, 120 American troops were injured and 3 Cubans. The disorders were evoked by news about the fact that only some tens of Cuban refugees had received political asylum in Spain. Today, for the first time in more than 70 years, the government of Great Britain began official talks with the Irish political organization Sinn Féin. Currently, Northern Ireland, or as it is also called Ulster, is living in the first months of peace proclaimed by the Catholic and Protestant paramilitary after 25 years of undeclared war. The ceasefire was greeted with joy in Ulster. This event was broadly celebrated by owners of pubs who, during the day, served beer and alcoholic beverages to their customers at a reduced price because these pubs were the favorite targets of terrorists during the unrest. This was a lengthy conflict which was based on national religious differences. 60% of Ulster is Protestant, 40% Catholic, and among the Catholic minority, unemployment is 2 times higher than among the Protestants. And this was the basic reason for discord when the Irish Catholics began to fight for their rights in the end of the 1960s. This resistance lasted a quarter of a century. 1,000 lives were taken by bloody diversions of the irreconcilable Irish Republican Army directed against British presence in Ulster, and their victims were innocent people on both sides. And finally, participants of this nightmare realized that they couldn't go on like that. 3 months ago, a truce agreement was reached. Convinced of its authenticity, official London and the Sinn Féin party, behind which the Irish Republican Army stands, sat at a dialogue table today. The English are demanding guarantees that terrorism be done away with forever, and Sinn Féin demands the full withdrawal of British troops from Ulster, who man around 20,000. One can't expect easy talks, but one wishes to hope that this coming Christmas will bring a long-awaited, firm peace to this land. Will Delors be a candidate or not? This question is asked by French politicians and the press in connection with the coming presidential elections here. The question is not a vain one because the latest opinion polls indicated that he currently has greater chances to move from the seat of the chairman of the European Commission, which he will leave in the end of January, to the seat of the president of the French Republic next May. The intense increase in the popularity of Delors in presidential predictions foiled the cards of the ruling right coalition, which recently was convinced of its own victory. The halo of the Prime Minister Balladur has tarnished visibly. He is in no condition to contend for the leader of the right forces and the only person capable of surpassing Delors. In a more difficult situation is Jacques Chirac, one of the 3 who has announced his candidacy. Predictions are predictions, but Jacques Delors is in no rush in deciding to run or not. He will promise to announce it by Christmas. The French evidently presume that Delors is more the man of the season. The political baggage he accumulated in Brussels may be of benefit to the country. Time will show. But will the moods of voters remain unswerved, or will a new favorite emerge in the pre-election race? Residents of Brazil are apparently very ingenious in methods of earning extra money and evading taxes. I think that's why our correspondent noticed this. In Brazil, they found at one time more than 100,000 ghosts, and they were exposed in the Secretariat of the Federal Administration, where, having launched a new computer program to work out transaction and accounting documents, they unexpectedly discovered that an enormous number of civil servants in the country appear not to be real people at all. They do appear on payrolls, and they do receive salary through the bank, but don't come to work. For example, in the National Institute of Sugar and Alcohol, since 1990, each of the 316 idle ghost employees received a monthly salary of around $1,200. In the Ministry of Regional Integration, there are half-empty offices, and the same thing in the National Roads and Transportation Department, although, according to payroll information, there's an abundance of bureaucrats there. The accumulation of ghosts exists not only in the government apparatus. The Federal Tax Department of Brazil just published a list of 30,000 fictitiously existing private firms and companies and has called them phantoms. All of this was assessed here as a shameless blow to the reputation of the country, which brought billions in losses, and which became possible because of the negligence and corruption of the authorities, confusion in the legislation, and shortcomings in the Constitution itself. Radical reforms in this area will be the task of the new team of the new President, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, who will take office on the first day of the new year. The next report, I have to say honestly, I waited for with impatience. A very intriguing name, an interview with a Strauss. Ostriches are not only the largest birds in the world, but probably the most amusing as well. Especially wonderful are the frolicking baby ostriches. Just as adults, they have good dispositions, they're easy to please, and they have such eyelashes that any beauty can only dream of. Ostriches eat everything at any time of the day or night. That's probably why they grow so big. At the West Coast farm near Cape Town, they acquired ostriches only 1 year ago because now it's the most lucrative field in South Africa and in the entire world. The demand and prices growing for the delicious and healthy eggs and meat of the ostrich, also for the beautiful sturdy skin of the bird. Also at the West Coast farm, the albinos ostriches are raised for special orders. First, the farmer had only black ostriches and they dreamed of a white one, but no matter what color it may be, black, white, or red, the main quality is its desire to peck anything that comes under its beak, even if it's a correspondent who's off guard. What are you doing? What are you doing, you hooligan? But this hooligan will not answer you. As far as new attempts to peck at the microphone, well, what else can you expect from a creature with such a massive body, but with a tiny, but so pretty head? On his 80th birthday, our colleague and radio journalist Matvey Lvovich Frolov began his morning. He reported through Mayak his article dedicated to the anniversary of the first liberation from the fascist occupation in World War II of the first Russian city, Tikhvin. Congratulations. It's not simple to tell you about a dear and close person. One probably doesn't ask why one loves his father or mother. Probably those who for decades go through life by Frolov's side, those who work with him, truly love that man. He's a journalist. 60 years at the microphone, it's difficult to imagine. For 60 years, Matvey Frolov tells the country about his favorite Leningrad, Petersburg, and his people, and he's always interesting to listen to, and we learn from him. If you paraphrase the famous statement of the classic, many generations of journalists graduated from Frolov's reports during the blockade days. Matvey Frolov reported from besieged Leningrad. All 900 days throughout the country, the voice of the journalist was heard. Valor, love to the homeland, honesty, decency. And these are not just lofty words. They were carried through the entire life by the oldest reporter of Russia. He never betrayed his moral principles to profit in the eras. And that's why Matvey Frolov is trusted, and today his voice is heard on the air. I'll just find out which report is ready. The dramatic fate of the last work of Sergei Bondarchuk was the topic of the press conference held today in the Union of Cinematographers of Russia. Today, in the Union of Cinematographers of Russia press conference was held. Opening it, the chairman of the State Committee of Cinema, Armen Medvedev, remembered the words of the famous producer Michel Seydoux: "He who wishes to go to Russia to film inexpensive films will lose. One has to go to Russia for talent." The conflict around the film Quiet Dawn, filmed by Sergei Bondarchuk, arose because the only owner of the material filmed is the firm International Cinema Company, which for more than a year has stopped all work on that film without giving any explanation. Not long before his death, Bondarchuk appealed with an open letter to the Italian cultural activists: "I believe that human justice and conscience still have the right to exist in this world, and I hope for your support." This is a lesson in defending our dignity in relations with the West, which will not help us unselfishly, but will be here to seek and squeeze out our talents. It would be a shame if the Bondarchuk film will suffer the same demise as the film Long Live Mexico of Eisenstein, which viewers could only see 50 years later. Good evening. After a one-day break, the chess players in the International World Olympiad of Chess, which is being held in Moscow, entered the battle. The first men's Russian team held a victory with a score of 2.5 over half over the team of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The leader of the Russians, Garry Kasparov, won his match against Grigorich, and Sergei Terekov also had success. Our second team shared points with the Estonian team 2-2, and now both Russian teams head the tournament chart. However, the match Bulgaria-Holland has not yet ended, in which the Bulgarians are ahead 3-0 and have a real chance for first place. In the International Hockey League Cup, there were 4 matches today. The most interesting match occurred in Moscow, where the Wings of the Soviets hosted the Torpedoes from Nizhny Novgorod at home. During the game, the Wings' advantage was undoubted. The hosts won all 3 periods, and the overall 5-0 for the team of Igor Dmitriev. Pardaugava beat Chemist 3-2, Skativali 5-2. The Sokol-Spartak match is not yet over. In Munich, at the Tennis Cup of the Grand Slam today, the quarter-final round will end. I'll remind you, yesterday, Pete Sampras and Goran Ivanisevic moved into the next circle. You see fragments of their match right now. The third participant in the semifinals is the rival of the Russians from the Davis Cup in Moscow, the Swede Magnus Larsson, in singles against the American Andre Agassi. Larsson won in 3 sets, 6-3, 1-6, 6-0. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. The north and northwest region of Russia tomorrow again will be under the influence of warm, humid Atlantic air. The Baltic countries, the Leningrad district, and Karelia will be in the zone of an atmospheric front. Here, there will be cloudy weather with rains, temperatures from 0 to +5. In Karelia, in the Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, and Leningrad districts, there will be wet snow with temperatures in the day from -4 to +1. In the Republic of Komi, during the day, -5 to 10. In the northeast of Komi, down to -15. The central and central Chernozem area, Saturday, under the influence of a small anticyclone, it will be partly cloudy with isolated light snow. Temperatures at night -5 to 10. During the day, -2 to 7. In the Rostov and Volgograd districts, in the zone of a cold atmospheric front, there will be abundant snowfalls with icy roads, temperatures from 0 to -5. In the Stavropol and Krasnodar Rim areas, there will be cloudy with wet snow, temperatures around 0. In the republics of the Northern Caucasus, again, strong snowfalls are expected. In the mountains, there's a danger of snowslides. Beyond the Caucasus, there will be some light snow in Georgia and Armenia. At night, -10. During the day, 0 to -6. In Armenian valleys, from +1 to 6 degrees. The cooler weather will grip the east of Ukraine, where the temperatures will go down to -3 to 8. On the rest of Ukraine and in Belarus as well, expected is cloudy weather. In Belarus, snow with rain, temperatures 0, -3. In Moldova, thick fogs and some drizzling rain, temperatures of up to +5. And about the weather in Petersburg and Moscow. In Petersburg, tomorrow, cloudy with some rain with snow. Temperatures at night, 0-2, during the day around 0. In Moscow, it will be partly cloudy without much precipitation. Winds are from the south. Temperatures at night, -7 to 9. During the day, -3 to 5. In the suburb, down to -2 to 7. That's the weather predicted for Saturday, and I wish you a good mood, energy, and a pleasant rest on the weekend.